The silver locket felt cold against Martha Lane's palm as she pressed it one last time to her lips. It had been her husband's final gift, given to her the night before he rode out to fight claim jumpers and never came home. Inside was a photograph of their wedding day, two young faces bright with hope, unaware that love could demand such terrible prices. "Mama, please." 10-year-old Ada's voice cut through the howling blizzard, her bare feet already turning blue in the snow. "I'm scared." Martha's heart shattered with each step toward the crossroads, where Blackjack Mercer waited in the storm's fury. The locket's weight in her pocket felt heavier than her grief, heavier than the choice that would damn her soul. Behind them in their tar paper shack, baby Grace burned with fever, while Martha clutched the promise of 3 silver coins and a bowl of warm stew. "Be brave, my darling." Martha whispered, though the words tasted like ash. "Be brave for Mama." At the trading post, Mercer's black coat made him look like death itself. Steam rose from the bowl in his hands, salvation and damnation served hot. Martha had begged every soul in Widow's Refuge, had sold everything but hope itself, and still Grace's fever climbed toward the angels. "You brought her?" Mercer set his pale eyes studying Ada like livestock. Martha's hand trembled as she reached for the coins, each one a nail in her daughter's coffin. "She's good. Smart. She'll—" The words died as Ada's trusting eyes met hers, still believing her mother would save her. "Mama, what's happening?" The transaction took seconds. Coins changed hands. Ada's scream pierced the storm as Martha turned and ran, clutching the bowl that would buy Grace another day. The locket fell from her pocket, disappearing into the snow, a heart lost to winter's mercy. Behind her, Ada's cries followed like hungry wolves. But Martha didn't look back. She couldn't. Some choices burned bridges that could never be rebuilt. Widow's Refuge clung to the mountain's edge like a desperate prayer, its cluster of ramshackle buildings defying both gravity and hope. The silver mine that had birthed the town was dying, its veins tapped dry, leaving behind families too poor to leave and too proud to beg. Martha Lane belonged to both categories. The fever had started 3 days ago, turning Grace's skin to fire and her breathing to whispers. Dr. Henley demanded payment up front, $5 that might as well have been $500. The preacher offered prayers, but no medicine. The neighbors, struggling with their own demons, shut their doors with apologetic eyes. "There's got to be something," Ada had said, counting their meager coins for the 100th time. At 10, she already knew the weight of hunger, the cold bite of reality. She scrubbed floors at Murphy's saloon for pennies, her small hands cracked and bleeding, aging before her time. "There is," Martha had whispered, watching her eldest daughter sleep beside her dying sister. "God forgive me, there is." Blackjack Mercer found desperate people the way buzzards found carrion. He'd arrived in Widow's Refuge a week ago, asking questions about families with extra mouths to feed. His reputation preceded him: bounty hunter, debt collector, and worse. Mothers hushed their children when he passed. But Martha had listened when he spoke of Widow McCabe's orphanage, high up in the mountains, he told her during their secret meeting. "Takes in unwanted children, gives them purpose, work, a future. Better than starving in these hovels." The lies had sounded like mercy, then wrapped in Martha's desperation. She'd held Ada that night, memorizing the warmth of her daughter's body, the trust in her sleepy murmurs. By morning, she'd convinced herself it was salvation for them all. Now, stumbling through the blizzard with Grace's medicine in her hands, Martha tasted the true flavor of her choice. It was bitter as winter, sharp as betrayal, and it would follow her to the grave. The iron gates of McCabe's orphanage closed behind Ada with the finality of a coffin lid. Through the bars, she watched Mercer's retreating figure disappear into the storm, taking with him any hope of return. The coins her mother had pressed into her hands lay scattered in the snow where she'd thrown them 3 pieces of silver that had bought her freedom and sold her soul. "Stop your crying," came a voice sharp as broken glass. "Tears won't help you here." Widow McCabe stood on the steps like a vulture in black silk, her gray hair pulled so tight it seemed to stretch her skull. She was perhaps 50, with the kind of beauty that turned cruel with age and calculation. Her eyes were winter ice, and they missed nothing. "I'm Ada Lane," the girl said, lifting her chin with the stubborn pride her father had passed down. "I want to go home." "Home." McCabe's laugh could have frozen hell itself. "Child, this is your home now. Your mama made that clear when she took Mercer's money." The orphanage squatted against the mountainside like a diseased growth, its gray stone walls weeping with ice. Inside, narrow hallways twisted like a maze, each door hiding children who'd learned to move like ghosts. Ada counted 17 souls as McCabe led her through the building, hollow-eyed phantoms aged 6 to 16, all wearing the same gray wool uniforms, all bearing invisible shackles. Her dormitory held 6 beds, crammed into a space meant for 3. The girl in the nearest bed couldn't have been 8, her arm wrapped in blood-stained bandages. When Ada tried to speak, the child just pointed to her throat and shook her head. "That's Mary," whispered another girl from across the room. "Had her tongue cut out last month for asking too many questions. I'm Sarah, been here 3 years come spring." 3 years. Ada's voice cracked like ice. "Haven't your parents?" "Parents." Sarah's bitter laugh belonged to someone twice her age. "Honey, our parents are the ones who brought us here. Mine traded me for gambling debts. Others came for food medicine or just because they had too many mouths to feed." That night, Ada lay on the straw mattress and listened to the wind howl through the cracks in the stone. Somewhere in the darkness, a child sobbed with the hopeless sound of the truly broken. She thought of Grace, wondering if the medicine had worked, if her sacrifice had meaning. But even as she told herself it did, Ada Lane began planning her escape. The laundry room was a steam-choked hell where children's hands turned red and raw from lye soap and scalding water. Ada's delicate fingers, once carefully tended by her mother, cracked and bled within hours. The work was endless sheets stained with things she didn't want to imagine, clothes that reeked of fear and worse. "Keep your head down," Sarah hissed as McCabe prowled the room like a hungry wolf. Never look her in the eye, never speak unless spoken to, and never ever ask questions. But Ada couldn't help watching everything with the sharp intelligence her father had passed down. She noticed how certain children flinched when McCabe approached, how others simply disappeared overnight, how the locked door at the end of the hall remained forbidden territory. The boy who caught her attention most was Tom, perhaps 12, with auburn hair and dark eyes that held depths of pain. His right hand was twisted and scarred fingers bent at unnatural angles. He moved through his chores with mechanical precision, never speaking, never meeting anyone's gaze. "What happened to him?" Ada whispered to Sarah during their brief supper break. "Tried to run last winter." Sarah replied, her voice barely audible. "McCabe had Mercer's men catch him in the woods. Broke every finger one by one while the rest of us watched. Said it was a lesson in obedience." Ada felt sick but also angry. The injustice of it burned in her chest like swallowed fire. These children weren't orphans. They were prisoners, slaves, bought and sold by the adults who should have protected them. That night, she lay awake making plans. The windows were barred, the doors locked, but there had to be a way out. There always was, if you were smart enough to find it. Her chance came 3 days later when she was assigned to clean McCabe's private quarters. The woman's study was a shrine to avarice ledgers filled with names and prices, correspondence with buyers across 3 territories, and a locked strongbox that surely contained enough money to free every child in the building. But it was the map on the wall that caught Ada's attention. It showed the mountain passes, the mine shafts, the network of caves that honeycombed the peaks. There, a thin line marked an old prospector's trail that wound down the back of the mountain toward the valley. "Find something interesting." Ada spun to find McCabe in the doorway, her smile sharp as a blade. "No, ma'am, just dusting." "Dusting." McCabe stepped closer, her eyes studying Ada's face. "You're a bright one, aren't you? Brighter than most who end up here. That could be useful or dangerous. I haven't decided which yet." The walking stick came down across Ada's shoulders, hard enough to drop her to her knees. Stars exploded behind her eyes as McCabe leaned close enough for Ada to smell the corruption on her breath. "Curiosity is expensive here, child. Next time it might cost you more than a bruise." But as Ada stumbled back to the dormitory, her mind was already racing. She'd seen the map memorize the trail. Now she just needed to find Tom and convince him to trust her. The real challenge would be surviving long enough to use what she'd learned. Tom's broken hand told the story of McCabe's cruelty better than words ever could. 3 of his fingers had been shattered so thoroughly they'd healed crooked, leaving him barely able to grip a spoon. But his mind remained sharp, and when Ada finally cornered him in the potato cellar, she discovered he'd been planning his own form of rebellion. "You can't run," he whispered the first words she'd heard him speak. "She's got men watching every trail, dogs that can track you through a blizzard. And if they bring you back..." He held up his twisted hand. "Then we don't run," Ada replied. "We fight." Tom's eyes widened. No child had ever spoken such words in McCabe's domain. Over the following weeks, they began gathering intelligence like tiny spies. Ada counted the guards, memorized their routines, noted which doors stayed unlocked and when. Tom mapped the building's hidden spaces, loose floorboards, forgotten storage rooms, the network of steam pipes that carried heat through the walls. But their surveillance revealed horrors that made escape seem selfish. Children regularly disappeared from their beds, taken by McCabe's clients, who arrived under cover of darkness. The younger ones, the pretty ones, commanded the highest prices. Ada watched a 6-year-old boy named Peter vanish one night, his bed empty by morning, his name never mentioned again. "Where do they go?" she asked Sarah, who'd grown gaunt with fear as her 16th birthday approached. "Places where childhood dies," Sarah replied. "Mining camps where boys work until their lungs give out. Brothels where girls..." "Don't ask questions you don't want answered, Ada. Some knowledge is too heavy to carry." The breaking point came when they brought in Lucy, a 5-year-old with golden curls and blue eyes still bright with innocence. She cried for her mama every night, soft sobs that tore at Ada's heart like claws. McCabe watched the child with calculating eyes, and Ada knew with sick certainty what fate awaited her. "We have to save her," Ada told Tom as they huddled in the cellar. "How if we try to run with her, we'll all die." "Not run, burn it down." The words hung in the air like smoke. Tom stared at her, seeing something in her eyes that made him take a step back. "You're serious? The stables are full of dry hay. The wood is old dry. One spark in the right place, and this whole mountain would see the flames. And the children inside, we get them out first. Create chaos, break them free. Some might die, but those who live will be free." Tom was quiet for a long time, studying her face in the candlelight. Finally, he nodded. "When? Tonight. Before they sell Lucy to whoever's coming for her tomorrow." They spent the remaining hours in preparation, gathering what warm clothes they could steal, filling pockets with kitchen matches, mapping escape routes for each dormitory. As the other children slept, Ada felt the weight of what she was about to do settle on her shoulders like lead. People would die tonight. She might die tonight. But Lucy would not be sold like cattle, and McCabe's reign of terror would end in flames. At midnight, as the blizzard howled outside, Ada Lane prepared to burn down hell itself. The locket was small and silver, its surface worn smooth by countless fingers. Black Jack Mercer had found it in the tunnel after the children's failed escape attempt, and something about it nagged at him like an infected wound. He'd kept it for weeks, studying the delicate engraving, the tiny photograph hidden inside. "For my beloved Margaret, Christmas 1847. The woman in the photograph was young, perhaps 20, with dark hair and eyes that sparkled with hope. He'd known her as Maggie Sullivan, a saloon girl in Denver, who'd warmed his bed during a bitter winter 21 years ago. She'd been pregnant when he left town, but he'd hoped that nature would take its course. But it hadn't. She'd kept the child, raised her, loved her. And that child was here in this place of horrors because of him, Ada. He whispered the name, feeling foreign on his tongue. His daughter, his blood. "Took you long enough to figure it out?" McCabe said from the doorway, her smile sharp as winter. "I've known since the day her mama brought her here. That girl's got your eyes, Jack. Your stubborn chin, your talent for survival. How long have you known who I really am?" "Since our first meeting." McCabe moved to her desk, pulling out a thick file. Jacob Mercer wanted for the murder of the Harrison family in Colorado Springs. Killed them in their beds and blamed it on Comanche raiders. Been running ever since. The wanted poster bore a younger version of his face, clean-shaven and desperate. The reward had grown over the years, $5,000 for the man who'd killed a family of 4 in cold blood. "That girl is my daughter," he said, his voice hollow. "That girl is my property." McCabe corrected. "Bought and paid for. But I'll make you a deal, Jack. Keep bringing me children, keep your mouth shut, and I'll make sure she gets placed somewhere nice. A farm family, maybe. People who'll treat her well. And if I refuse," McCabe's laugh was like breaking glass, "then I send this file to every marshal between here and California. They'll hang you before Christmas, and the girl will still be mine." Mercer stared at the file, seeing his life laid out in newspaper clippings and witness statements. 15 years of running, of building a new identity, of trying to outrun the demons of his past. And now those demons had caught up with him in the worst possible way. "There's more." McCabe continued, her voice silky with malice. "That doctor in town, Dr. Henley, he's been asking questions about missing children, writing letters to territorial authorities. Seems your daughter's disappearance has stirred up some inconvenient attention." She pulled out another file, this one containing correspondence between Henley and various law enforcement agencies. The doctor had been more thorough than Mercer had imagined, documenting patterns of disappearances, connecting dots that led straight to McCabe's operation. "I need you to handle the good doctor," McCabe said. "Permanently. Make it look like an accident, a robbery gone wrong, perhaps. Do that, and I'll consider letting your daughter live to see her next birthday." Mercer felt the walls closing in around him. He'd spent years building his reputation as a hunter of men, never knowing he was hunting toward this moment when the prey would become the predator's own blood. The irony was sharp enough to cut. "She's just a child," he said, his voice breaking. "She's a commodity," McCabe replied. "And you're going to help me profit from her, or you're both going to die." Outside, the wind howled through the mountain passes, carrying the scent of snow and the promise of a hard winter. Mercer stared out the window, seeing his reflection ghosted in the glass, a killer faced with the one crime he couldn't commit. The one choice that would damn him regardless of what he decided. In the dormitory below, Ada Lane slept fitfully, unaware that her father was alive, unaware that he was the architect of her suffering. Tomorrow would bring new horrors, new choices, new betrayals. But tonight, she dreamed of fire and freedom, of silver coins and her mother's tears. The storm was coming, and it would wash away everything they thought they knew about justice, mercy, and the price of redemption. Dawn came gray and merciless, bringing with it the news that made Ada's blood turn to ice. Lucy was gone, sold during the night to a man who'd paid in gold coins and asked no questions. The child's bed was stripped bare, her few possessions scattered like autumn leaves, as if she'd never existed at all. No. Ada breathed, her fists clenching until her nails drew blood from her palms. No, no, no. Quiet. Sarah hissed, glancing nervously toward the door. You'll bring McCabe down on all of us. But Ada was beyond caring about consequences. The rage that had been building inside her for weeks finally found its voice, and she screamed a sound of pure anguish that echoed through the gray stone halls like a battle cry. McCabe appeared as if summoned by the sound, her black dress making her look like death incarnate. Her smile was sharp enough to cut glass. Missing someone, are we? Where is she? Ada's voice cracked like a whip. Where is Lucy? Gone to her new family. Nice people who'll give her everything she needs. McCabe's eyes glittered with malice. You should be happy for her. You're lying. You sold her to monsters. The walking stick came down across Ada's back with enough force to drive her to her knees. Stars exploded behind her eyes, but the pain only fed her fury. I sold her to the highest bidder. McCabe said, her voice soft as poisoned honey. Just like I'll sell you when the right customer comes along. Just like I sold your precious Tom's sister last year. Ada's head snapped up. Tom's sister, didn't he tell you, sweet little thing, perhaps 7 years old? Tom tried to protect her, tried to hide her when the buyers came. But money talks louder than brotherly love, and she commanded a very high price indeed. Through the doorway, Ada could see Tom standing frozen in the hallway, his broken hand pressed against his mouth as if trying to hold back screams. His eyes were wide with the kind of pain that broke souls, and Ada understood why he'd stopped speaking. Why he moved through his days like a ghost. That night, as the other children slept, Ada and Tom met in the cellar one final time. Neither spoke of Lucy or of Tom's sister or of the horrors that awaited them all. Instead, they spoke of fire. The stable. Tom whispered, his voice steady despite the tears on his cheeks. Dry hay, old wood. It'll go up like kindling. And then we run, all of us. Some won't make it, but those who do will be free. Ada nodded, feeling the weight of leadership settle on her shoulders. She was 10 years old, but McCabe's cruelty had aged her beyond her years. Tonight, she would either save these children or die trying. They had matches hidden in the cellar walls, warm clothes stolen from the laundry, and a plan born of desperation and hope. As the midnight hour approached, Ada felt her father's stubborn courage flowing through her veins like fire. She didn't know that 20 miles away, her mother was loading a rifle and beginning the long climb up the mountain. She didn't know that Dr. Henley was writing urgent letters to the territorial marshal, documenting years of evidence against McCabe's operation. And she didn't know that her own father was watching from the shadows, torn between saving her and saving himself. All she knew was that children were dying, and someone had to fight back. The matches felt warm in her pocket as she climbed the stairs toward destiny. Tonight, hell would burn, and from its ashes, something better would rise, or they would all die trying. The first match hissed to life in Ada's trembling fingers as she crouched in the stable's shadow. The hay was dry as bone, the wooden walls seasoned by decades of mountain weather. One spark was all it would take to turn McCabe's empire into an inferno. Ada, wait. Tom's voice cracked with urgency as he grabbed her wrist. Someone's coming. Through the storm, they could see lantern light bobbing toward the stable, McCabe herself flanked by 2 of her hired men. They'd been discovered, their plan exposed before it could begin. The cellar. Ada hissed, dragging Tom toward the building's foundation. We go through the tunnel. But as they reached the loose stone that marked their escape route, boots thundered behind them. Rough hands seized Ada's shoulders, yanking her back into the storm. McCabe's face appeared in the lantern light, twisted with rage. Did you really think you could burn me out, you little witch? The walking stick cracked across Ada's skull, sending her sprawling into the snow. Blood ran warm down her temple as McCabe's men hauled her to her feet. String her up in the main hall, McCabe snarled. Let the other children watch what happens to rebels. They dragged Ada through the orphanage like a trophy past dormitories full of terrified faces. In the main hall, they threw a rope over the central beam, fashioning a noose with practiced efficiency. Ada's heart hammered against her ribs as they forced her onto a chair, the rough hemp scratching her neck. Children of Widow McCabe's home for foundlings. The woman called her voice echoing through the stone halls. Gather round and witness the price of defiance. They came like ghosts, 17 souls aged 6 to 16, all bearing the hollow eyes of the broken. Sarah Jake Mary with her severed tongue, and all the others whose names Ada had learned in her brief time among the damned. This child thought she could destroy what I've built. McCabe continued, her hand resting on the rope. She thought fire could cleanse her sins, could wash away the stain of abandonment. But there is no redemption here, children. There is only survival and service. Ada's legs shook as she balanced on the chair, the noose tight around her throat. But her voice was steady when she spoke. She's lying, she called to the assembled children. There is hope. There is escape. You don't have to die in this place. Silence. McCabe yanked the rope, lifting Ada onto her toes. Another word and The explosion of splintering wood cut her off as the main door burst inward. Through the opening stumbled a figure from Ada's nightmares, Martha Lane, her hair white with snow, her husband's rifle clutched in bleeding hands. Let her go, Martha rasped, raising the weapon with shaking arms. McCabe laughed, the sound sharp as breaking bones. Martha Lane? Come to collect your merchandise? I'm afraid the girl's proven defective. Damaged goods, you might say. She's my daughter. She's my property. Bought and paid for with your husband's silver. Those coins were meant for Grace's medicine. Martha said, her voice breaking. I was desperate, dying inside, but I was wrong. I was so terribly wrong. Wrong. McCabe's smile was winter itself. You were practical. The weak die so the strong might live. That's the law of the wilderness, and I am its prophet. Martha's finger found the trigger, but the shot went wide as Black Jack Mercer stepped from the shadows. His gun was already drawn, aimed at Martha's heart. Hello, Maggie, he said, using the name from their shared past. It's been a long time. Martha's face went white as recognition dawned. Jack Mercer, but you're dead. Apparently not. His pale eyes found Ada's, and she saw something terrible there, love and guilt and 20 years of running from the truth. This is my daughter, isn't it? Our daughter. The words hit Martha like physical blows. She staggered backward, the rifle wavering in her grip. You're her father. You're the one who took her. I'm the one who brought her here, yes. I'm also the one who's going to save her. Jack McCabe warned, her voice sharp with authority. Remember our agreement. Our agreement is void. Mercer replied, never taking his eyes off Ada. Some prices are too high to pay. The gunshot echoed through the hall like thunder. McCabe's walking stick splintered in her hand as Mercer's bullet found its mark, but the woman was faster than age suggested. She rolled behind the makeshift gallows, drawing a hidden pistol from her skirts. Kill them all, she screamed to her men. Leave no witnesses. Chaos erupted as the children scattered like startled birds. Martha's rifle barked again, taking down one of McCabe's gunmen. Tom appeared from nowhere, a kitchen knife flashing in his good hand as he cut Ada's bonds. The noose fell away, just as the chair kicked out from under her. The stable, Ada gasped, rubbing her throat. The fire, we need the fire. Tom nodded, understanding, flowing between them without words. While the adults fought their deadly dance around the main hall, the children slipped away into the storm. Ada still had matches in her pocket, and now she had a reason beyond mere escape. The stable caught faster than she'd dared hope. Dry hay exploded into flame, sending sparks dancing through the blizzard. Within minutes, the fire had spread to the main building's wooden sections, turning night into hellish day. But McCabe wasn't finished. As Ada stumbled through the snow toward the growing inferno, the woman appeared like a demon from the flames. Her dress was singed, her hair wild, but her pistol was steady. "If I can't profit from you," she snarled, "then no one will." The shot meant for Ada's heart took Martha instead. The woman who had sold her daughter for 3 silver coins threw herself into the path of death, her body shielding the child she'd failed to protect. Blood bloomed across her chest like a crimson flower. "Mama." Ada caught her mother as she fell, feeling warm life flowing out into the snow. "I'm sorry," Martha whispered, her voice growing faint. "I'm so sorry, baby. I thought it was the only way." "It's okay, Mama. You came back for me. Love you." Martha breathed, and then she was gone, her eyes fixed on stars she'd never see again. McCabe raised her pistol for the killing shot, but Tom's knife found her back before she could fire. The blade slid between her ribs like justice itself, and she toppled forward into the snow, her blood steaming in the bitter air. Through the flames and smoke, Black Jack Mercer stumbled toward his daughter, his own shirt stained with blood, from wounds that would soon claim him. Behind him, the orphanage burned like a beacon, visible for miles, its light calling help from the valley below. "Ada," he gasped, falling to his knees beside her. "My girl, my daughter." She looked at him, this stranger who was her father, this killer who had tried to save her, and felt the last pieces of her childhood crumble to ash. "I know," she said simply. "I know who you are." They knelt there in the snow, surrounded by fire and death, as sirens wailed in the distance, and help finally arrived. Too late for Martha, too late for McCabe, too late for the innocents that had died with Lucy's disappearance, but not too late for hope. Not too late for the children who stumbled from the flames into the arms of townspeople led by Father Mackenzie and Dr. Henley. Not too late for the justice that would finally come to Widow's Refuge. The storm was ending, and with it, an era of darkness that had lasted far too long. Dawn broke gray and clean over the smoking ruins of McCabe's orphanage, revealing the true scope of what had been lost and found. 17 children had entered the building as slaves. 14 walked out as survivors. The dead included McCabe herself, 2 of her gunmen, and Tom, who had died protecting the others, his broken hand, finally finding strength in sacrifice. Martha Lane was buried in Widow's Refuge Cemetery 3 days later under a simple wooden cross that bore only her name and the words, "She came back." Ada stood dry-eyed at the graveside, her 10-year-old face carved from winter itself. Father Mackenzie spoke of redemption and forgiveness, but Ada heard only the wind through the pines. Black Jack Mercer lingered for 5 days before his wounds claimed him. In his lucid moments, he told Ada stories of her mother as a young woman, bright, beautiful, full of dreams, that hardship had slowly ground away. He spoke of his own sins, the family he'd killed in Colorado Springs, the years of running that had led him to this mountain of regrets. "I can't undo what I've done," he whispered as life leaked out of him. "But maybe you can do better. Be better." He pressed a small leather pouch into her hands. Before he died, the 3 silver coins Martha had been paid along with all the money he'd saved over 15 years of blood work. It was enough to ensure Ada and Grace would never know poverty again. The trials began in spring when the passes cleared, and territorial authorities could reach Widow's Refuge. Ada testified with the composure of someone twice her age, her clear voice cutting through the legal fog, to reveal McCabe's crimes in stark detail. The network of corruption stretched across 3 territories, involving judges, politicians, and businessmen who had profited from the trafficking of children. Dr. Henley became Ada's guardian, his guilt over Grace's near death driving him to dedicate his life to the sisters' welfare. He used Mercer's money to establish a proper medical practice serving families who had been turned away as he'd once turned away Martha. "You don't owe us anything," Ada told him one evening as he helped Grace with her letters. I owe you everything, he replied quietly. I failed your family once. I won't fail again. The surviving children were placed with families throughout the territory, carefully vetted to prevent another McCabe from emerging. Sarah went to live with a farming family in Kansas, her sharp intelligence finally finding nurture instead of exploitation. Jake, despite his young age, showed remarkable resilience and was adopted by a blacksmith who appreciated his mechanical aptitude. But it was the changes in Widow's Refuge itself that marked the true victory over McCabe's legacy. The scandal had exposed the rot that had been festering in the town's heart, forcing a reckoning with years of willful blindness. New laws were passed, new officials elected, and most importantly, new attitudes took root. The mining families, once isolated by poverty and desperation, began to work together. Father Mackenzie established a fund for families in crisis, ensuring no parent would face Martha's impossible choice again. Dr. Henley trained midwives and basic medical assistants, spreading knowledge that had once been hoarded behind paywalls. Ada watched these changes with the satisfaction of someone who had paid the price for progress. She was 11 now, but carried herself with the gravity of a woman who had seen the worst of human nature and helped burn it down. Grace mercifully remembered nothing of her near death or her mother's sacrifice, growing into a bright, happy child who saw her older sister as the center of her universe. 15 years later, Ada Lane returned to Widow's Refuge as Miss Ada Henley, having taken the name of the man who had raised her after the ashes settled. She was 26 now, a woman of purpose and determination, with schools for orphan children in 4 territories and a reputation that reached the territorial capital. Grace, 20 and beautiful, accompanied her as both assistant and dearest friend. The town had transformed beyond recognition. Where once tar paper shacks had huddled against the wind, now solid houses lined proper streets. The mine had closed years ago, but the town had found new life as a trading post for the railroad that now connected the mountain valleys to the wider world. Their first stop was the cemetery where Martha Lane's grave bore a new headstone, white marble carved with roses, and the inscription, "Beloved Mother who chose love over fear." Dr. Henley, who had died peacefully the previous winter, lay beside her, as did Father Mackenzie and others who had helped rebuild the town's soul. "I remember her," Grace said quietly, surprising Ada with the admission. "Not much, just warmth, safety, the feeling of being loved." "She did love you," Ada replied, kneeling to place fresh flowers on the grave. "She loved us both more than she loved herself." They visited the site of the old orphanage next now, a memorial garden where wildflowers grew among the foundations. A simple stone marker told the story of what had happened there, honoring both the victims and the survivors who had found the courage to fight back. That evening, Ada addressed a gathering at the church, speaking to a crowd that included several of her fellow survivors. Sarah had indeed become a successful farmer, her sharp wit now channeled into improving agricultural techniques. Jake owned his own smithy, and others had found their own paths to happiness and purpose. "We are the ones who lived," Ada told them, her voice carrying the authority of experience. "We carry the memories of those who didn't, and the responsibility to ensure their deaths had meaning. Every child we save, every law, we change every heart we touch. That's Tom's legacy. That's Lucy's legacy. That's the legacy of everyone who died in those flames." After the speech, an elderly woman approached with tears in her eyes. She was perhaps 70, with white hair and hands weathered by honest work. "Miss Henley," the woman said, her voice trembling with emotion. "I'm Mrs. Catherine Walsh. I used to run the general store here back when your mother came begging for help." Ada studied the woman's weathered face, and slowly the memory returned, one of many who had turned Martha away in her hour of desperate need. "I remember you," Ada said quietly. "I've carried the shame of that day for 15 years. Mrs. Walsh continued, tears flowing freely now. I had medicine on my shelves that could have saved your sister money in my till that could have prevented everything that followed. But I was scared, selfish, worried about my own family's survival. She reached into her coat and withdrew a small wooden box, its surface polished smooth by decades of handling. I found this the morning after the fire, she said, opening the box to reveal Martha's silver locket. It must have fallen from her pocket in the snow. I've been keeping it safe, hoping someday I could return it to where it belonged. Ada's breath caught as she took the locket in trembling hands. The engraving was still clear, despite the tarnish. For my beloved Margaret, Christmas, 1847. Inside, the tiny photograph of her grandmother smiled up at her, a woman Ada had never known, but whose love had traveled down through generations. There's something else, Mrs. Walsh said, her voice barely above a whisper. Something I never told anyone. The night your mother sold you to Mercer. She came to me first. Ada's head snapped up. What? She offered me the locket as collateral for medicine. Said she'd work off the debt, do anything I asked. But I turned her away. Told her the locket wasn't worth enough. Mrs. Walsh's voice broke completely. If I had just said yes, if I had shown one moment of Christian mercy, none of it would have happened. The revelation hit Ada like a physical blow. Her mother's choice, the terrible decision that had shaped both their lives, might never have been necessary. The knowledge should have filled her with rage, but instead she felt only a deep, weary sadness. You couldn't have known, Ada said finally, her voice gentle despite the pain. None of us could have known how far desperation would drive her. How can you forgive me? Mrs. Walsh sobbed. How can you not hate me for what I did? Ada looked at the locket in her hands, then at Grace standing beside her, then at the thriving town spread out below them. So much pain had grown from that one moment of refusal, but so much good had come from the ashes as well, because hate is a poison that destroys the vessel that contains it. Ada replied the words carrying the wisdom of someone who had learned forgiveness the hard way. Because my mother's sacrifice, and Tom's and all the others, they mean nothing if we don't choose to be better than the world that broke us. She closed the locket and hung it around her neck, feeling its familiar weight settle against her heart. The past was finally at rest, its ghosts laid to bed. That night, in her room at the hotel, Ada sat with Grace and shared stories of their mother, not the desperate woman who had sold her daughter, but the loving wife and mother she had been before. Circumstances broke her spirit. She used to sing to us. Ada remembered her voice soft with memory. Lullabies about angels watching over sleeping children. Even when she was scared, even when she didn't know where our next meal would come from, she still sang. I remember that, Grace said suddenly, her eyes wide with surprise. Not the words, but the melody. Sometimes when I'm frightened, I hum it without realizing why. They sat together in comfortable silence, two women, bound by blood and tragedy and love that had survived the worst humanity could offer. Outside their window, the lights of Widow's Refuge twinkled like earthbound stars, a testament to the community that had risen from the ashes of corruption. The next morning brought one final surprise. As they prepared to leave for the train station, a young man approached them on the platform. He was perhaps 25, with dark hair and intelligent eyes that seemed familiar. Miss Henley, he said, removing his hat respectfully. I'm sorry to bother you, but I believe we know each other. My name is Thomas Chen, though you might remember me as just Tom. Ada's heart stopped. The boy who had died protecting her, who had sacrificed himself in the flames, stood before her alive and whole. His right hand, once twisted and broken, bore the scars of old injuries, but functioned normally. Tom, she whispered, hardly daring to believe. But you died. I saw you. You saw me fall. he corrected gently. The knife wound looked worse than it was, and the smoke knocked me unconscious. Dr. Henley found me in the ruins and nursed me back to health, but by then you'd already left for the trials. I was told you'd been informed of my survival, but apparently someone wanted me to think you were dead. Ada finished, understanding dawning. Dr. Henley, he wanted me to grieve cleanly, to move forward without looking back. Tom nodded. He thought it would be easier for you to heal if you weren't tied to the past. I disagreed, but I was just a kid, and he was your guardian. I've regretted not reaching out to you every day since. What did you do? How did you live? Dr. Henley arranged for me to be adopted by a Chinese family in San Francisco. They were good people, taught me their language, their customs, gave me a name that meant peaceful heart. I became a teacher like you. We've been working with the same children, just on opposite sides of the country. Ada felt tears streaming down her face, but they were tears of joy rather than sorrow. The boy who had been her closest ally in hell had not only survived, but thrived, becoming the kind of man who dedicated his life to helping others. I have something that belongs to you, Tom said, reaching into his jacket. He withdrew a small wooden carving, a horse Ada had whittled during their long nights planning escape. She had given it to him for luck the night before the fire. You kept it, she breathed. It reminded me that even in the darkest places, people can create beautiful things. He replied. It reminded me of you. As the train whistle blew and passengers began boarding, Ada realized that her journey to Widow's Refuge had not been about closure at all. It had been about discovery, learning that love could survive separation, that heroism could grow from the most unlikely soil, and that sometimes the dead could rise again, not through miracles, but through the simple, stubborn refusal to let evil have the final word. Come with us, she said impulsively, taking Tom's scarred hand in hers. Help us build something better. Help us make sure no child ever has to choose between love and survival again. Tom smiled, the first genuine smile she'd seen from him since their childhood. I thought you'd never ask. As the train pulled away from Widow's Refuge, carrying 3 survivors toward a future bright with possibility, Ada fingered the locket at her throat and felt her mother's presence like a benediction. Martha Lane had made a terrible choice, born of desperate love. But from that choice had grown something beautiful. A woman strong enough to fight injustice, compassionate enough to forgive cruelty, and wise enough to know that redemption was not a destination, but a daily decision. The silver locket caught the morning sunlight as it had once caught lamplight in a burning orphanage. And Ada knew that some treasures love, courage, hope, were worth more than all the coins in the world. Behind them, Widow's Refuge grew smaller in the distance, but its lesson traveled with them that even in the darkest winter spring would come, and with it the chance for new growth in soil enriched by sacrifice. The past was finally at peace, and the future stretched ahead like an unwritten story waiting for hands brave enough to hold the pen.